Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Modern Sales Pros Masterclass on the future of RevOps, sponsored by the team at Varicent. Really excited to have two first-time panelists joining us here today. And Marko and Martin, thank you for joining us. We have a little bit of a tradition here on Modern Sales Pros for our first-time panelists. We always want to learn a little bit more about you and a little bit more about any maybe hobbies that you've picked up or refined since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. So Marko, let's start with you. Anything new that you've picked up or honed since the start of the pandemic?
So I've always been making sourdough bread, but with the added time being at home, I decided to pick up some higher level pastry skills, and I ended up making about 6 dozen croissants every weekend for about 3 months, and then changed course after my pants no longer fit.
That's phenomenal. What's the trick to make them really flaky, right? Because sometimes, they're mushy and sometimes they're flaky. Is there like a trick that you can share?
Good lamination, which is hard to do at home, but it's actually letting them proof for an absurdly long time.
I don't know what either of those words mean because I don't know how to make a croissant. So do you want to what's proof and laminate?
So laminating is making layers of butter and dough. And so you roll it out and you fold it like a book, and you do that multiple times. And then proofing is when you're letting it rise after it's been shaped. And so you want to get it to 2 or 3 times its original size before you put it in the oven.
Ah, excellent. I learned 2 new things already, and we're only 2 minutes in. Martin, that's a tough act to follow because at MSP, we love our carbohydrates. But Martin, what have you been up to? Anything you've picked up or honed since the start of the pandemic?
Well, first of all, I've managed to be able to maintain my fighting weight. So that's accomplishment number 1. Number 2, I really picked up, I think, an important skill. We relocated from the New York suburbs to the Chicago suburbs and have developed the skill of being able to throw away many decades worth of possessions that were no longer necessary and cluttering up our attic and our basement. And so we now have a completely new life with a completely new set of possessions and new homes. So it's an exercise that I highly recommend once every couple of decades.
Excellent. No, that's good. It's also good. You declutter, you clear your brain out a little bit. You get to build some new stuff. I love it.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here today. Really excited about our conversation that we're having. As I mentioned before, today we're going to be talking about the future of RevOps. Today's session is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who aren't aware, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders. So those are folks that are in sales management, sales operations, revenue operations, obviously, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our community members where they can answer the most difficult questions that they face. We do that through bringing together wonderful speakers like Marko and Martin to talk about the future of RevOps. We have a very robust online discussion board. And also, once we can, we'll get back to our great in-person events. About 20,000 people in the community from about 6,000 different organizations. So it's a great place to get perspective from the best and the brightest. For those of you who aren't members, you'll be invited to join shortly afterwards. Everything we do is free for our members, and we'll encourage you to check it out. But today's content wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Varicent. I'm going to hand it over to Marko to say just a few words about Varicent. Marko?
Thanks, Richard. Varicent helps companies plan, operate, and pay across their full sales lifecycle. So we have 4 core products that we help customers achieve this with: a territory and quota planning product, a lead to revenue management product, a product for incentive compensation management, and an AI tool that connects it all together to help you get insights into how you can improve and streamline your sales performance management.
Excellent. Thank you, Marko. And today, really excited to talk about this topic. Revenue operations always feels like it's a hot button issue. And today we're going to be talking about the future of revenue operations. So you've heard a little bit from Marko, but we want both Marko and Martin to have a chance to introduce themselves. And Martin, let's start with you. You're the first time I think we've ever had a chief revenue scientist on. Really exciting for us. But Martin, please take a second, introduce yourself to the community here.
So I spent 20 years with IBM, the last 10 of which in the role of chief economist and chief analytics officer. And as many in the audience will know, the technology industry particularly, and in the US particularly, has really brought together the skills of economics and data science in a single function, in a single role. There are a number of us across a number of different technology companies, many of which are represented by the group here. So that's allowed us to take the developing and emerging capabilities over the past few years in the data science space and apply them to all of the issues that sales leaders, that business leaders face in the sales domain, around lead management, territory and quota planning, lead to revenue management, incentive compensation. So the whole portfolio of functions and capabilities that are necessary, really being able to apply machine learning and data science and in some cases deep learning to these processes. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, let me hand it off to Marko.
So quick backgrounder on me. I spent my early career working in B2B marketing operations, where I ran into the age-old battle of sales and marketing fighting. There's not enough leads. The leads aren't good enough. They're not actually being worked. That led me to start a company called Funnel Cake, as well as to write a book called the RevOps Framework 4 or 5 years ago now. And last year, Funnel Cake was acquired by Varicent. And in my new role here, I am leading our product portfolio across the plan, operate, pay story.
It's exciting to have these two amazing perspectives. And folks, just a few words on what we're going to cover off on today. We're going to hit on a few different topic areas. First, we're going to go through and try to define what the heck RevOps is and how we kind of got here. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the importance of data and analytics in creating a repeatable revenue process. And then we're going to talk about the current state of RevOps and how to establish this or affect change in your organization. Before we jump into our content today, just a couple housekeeping notes for our audience. First and foremost, please do use the Q&A panel. If you have questions, we've got these speakers for about another 40 minutes. So if anything comes up that's top of mind, you want to learn a little bit more about, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A panel. Second, we will be providing the recording to this and the key takeaways. So for those of you furiously taking notes, don't worry, we're going to help you out with that. And we're going to be sharing the recording shortly afterwards. Marko, Martin, you ready to jump in?
Ready to go.
Let's do it. So let's start by starting here. What the heck is RevOps and how the heck did we get here? I feel like 5 years ago, it wasn't a thing, and now it's definitely like a thing. So Martin, let's start with you a little bit on this. What's your perspective on how we got here and what the heck RevOps is?
So Marko really touched on the problem to be addressed. Many organizations make very large investments in marketing programs, and the ability to translate programs into leads into opportunities into sales into customer success is a challenge for many organizations. And given the tools and capability that are now emerging, not only the tools of data science, but data management as well, we're now in a position where we can reasonably expect to generate greater return, not only to marketing campaigns, turning the campaigns into sales revenue, but also being able to generate greater returns to the other activities through that process. So a lot of this really is the opportunity to take advantage of the technology that has become available to solve a longstanding problem that has existed. So Rich, back to you.
Oh, I think that's a great starting point. And Marko, I mean, you wrote the book on this just as the discipline was starting to get some traction. How would you frame what successful RevOps looks like to our audience here?
I think successful RevOps is being able to measure and understand your operations across the full funnel. So that's the alignment between marketing, sales, and customer success, or you can think about it as a combination of new business and existing business. Really, I think something that's been lost in the growth of RevOps is that focus on operations. We got really focused on like teams and culture and tools, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But really the success is how do we improve the operational efficiency across the customer lifecycle?
I think this is interesting, and I know we touched on this in the prep session. How does the rise of RevOps coincide with some of the differences that you're seeing out there in what maybe a model revenue leader looks like, right? And Martin, I know you had a really good point on like there's a VP of sales and there's a CRO, and they're a little bit different now than they were maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, at the risk of being too extreme, creating too much of a caricature, you know, the old VP of sales, first of all, was always a guy, number one, and number two, was very confident in his ability for what he would describe as, I've carried a bag for 30 years and I know exactly how to drive to our sales target. You know, and what we're learning is that certainly experience is important, and we don't want to discount anybody's experience. But we also have a set of tools, analytic and quantitative tools that are very much in the beginning of generating significant economic value, creating significant economic value. So that's transformed the role from what might have been a senior sales leader to a chief revenue officer who brings those analytic skills to the sales role and is able to combine the two.
That's a great perspective, and I think it's funny to think about how that evolution has occurred. And Marko, I know you've seen a few.
I guess I'm compelled to add. I probably should have added. And oftentimes in the discussions that we've had, the chief revenue officer is equally likely to be a woman in that role as a guy. So it's just another dimension of the diversity that comes to the role, which is very important.
I want to double click into this, and you're not prepped for this question, Martin, but do you see there being kind of equal portions of folks getting promoted into that role where you may have a customer success or account management leader, a senior revenue operations leader, and a senior revenue leader? It feels like those are the three pieces that all come together in the CRO, but have you seen a trend of more CS leaders or just straight ops leaders moving into that role?
Well, I wouldn't leave marketing off your list. You know, so it really draws from all of those disciplines or sets of experience. There is admittedly a bit of a trend to draw from the sales community, but we certainly have seen experience coming from senior marketing leaders, as well as senior customer success leaders as well. But again, go back to the point around diversity. It's diversity that allows us to innovate and create new ideas, because we all bring different ideas, we all bring different sets of experiences, and diversity is a key element of innovation and success.
I think that's a great set of points there. Marko, I wanted to double click into something that we hit on during our prep session, where you sort of observed a few different types of sales leaders that you're seeing in your journey and in your conversations as a product leader. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so this really gets into the question of, I'll be a little more extreme than Martin, is a CRO just a glorified VP of sales? And I've really observed there's three personas for your sales leader. You have your sales coach who can dive in on any deal. They're going to help you troubleshoot it. They know how to help you win a deal. You have your forecast manager who always knows how to make the quarter, but they're going to win the business month by month, quarter by quarter to get all those deals over the finish line. Your last leader is the person who believes that sales is math. They're the person who's working backwards from like a volume, value, velocity, conversion rates model. They're working backwards from where do we need to be next year, and what leads and programs do we need today in order to get there. And as I look at the variety of CROs that have been promoted into the role, there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of forecast managers, there's not enough people who believe sales is math. And I think looking at the disciplines of CMOs and CS leaders being promoted to a CRO, that's definitely a trend I've seen happening in my own network. And I think it's because of that operational rigor on the sales is math approach. Marketing can't work without math. So how can sales work without math?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's a good perspective to have too, where it's an art and a science, and we're probably trending more in the science direction, whereas 15 years ago it was steak dinners and martinis and relationships. And certainly I like a good martini and a good steak dinner, but we're moving beyond that a little bit now.
Yeah, no steak dinners in the past year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think this brings us to our second point. And Marko, you started to hit on this a little bit, but when we think about the revenue process and we think about making that repeatable, what is important from a data and an analytics standpoint when thinking about this? What are some of the first principles, Martin, that you've seen folks be kind of successful with, or some framing we can have to think about this a little bit more?
Well, certainly you have to start with the quality of the data and the discipline that a sales organization has in managing the data around their opportunities. The models are only as good as the data that we have to go in them. And if there is one piece of advice that I can give to senior business leaders, creating a culture where everybody is responsible for the quality of their data has tremendous economic value. It's much more difficult to go back and correct mistakes after they occur than it is to have the discipline to update the data, enter the data correctly the first time. And I know for a lot of sellers, it's tedious. Every day or every week, I have to go through my CRM file, whether it's Salesforce or some other provider, and make sure that all of the calls that I made are listed and logged. But that's what helps us to improve the quality of the analytics, which ultimately is going to help us improve the income earning potential that sellers have. So sometimes sellers neglect the relationship between the quality of the data that they're providing and their income earning potential and the ability to improve it, as Marko is just pointing out, through improved coaching, through improved analytics. All of that cannot occur unless we start with a good solid foundation with the data. Looks like Rich may have froze there for a second.
Yeah, I'll build on Martin's point there. I agree with what Martin said with the data being core to your decisions, but I would start with a step back on revenue operations. The real issue here is we don't have agreement and alignment between our teams on what this means. And looking between marketing, sales, and customer success, we really need to have agreement, alignment, and service level agreements, because they're three different teams managed by three different leaders. So as we're looking at things like what's the quality of our leads, first we have to agree on what does a quality lead look like, but we also have to treat those leads fairly. Are we going to pick them up and work them quickly and equally? Are we going to complete all of our cadences with them? What's the conversion rate and qualification rate look like? And if that foundation of alignment isn't there to begin with, it can become really difficult for your team to utilize the data that they have if they have it. And so I would definitely start with the alignment exercise to make sure everyone is speaking the same language first.
So Marko, it looks like you and I are going to have a conversation as Rich's bandwidth apparently has not held up. Hopefully he's going to get to his new home soon enough to get that corrected. But you know, as we think about the RevOps journey, one of the issues that I've seen that becomes challenging is that the marketing teams are deploying programs that they feel are going to generate the brand awareness and the leads that are necessary. But of course, customers respond in their own way, which may or may not be what was intended with the program that was deployed. And then it's up to the sellers to be able to take that indication of interest and turn it into a sales opportunity. So we talk about leads, but oftentimes leads just become not so much around for a specific offering, but to solve a problem that may be somehow related to that offering. And oftentimes that's where the linkage between the lead and the opportunity kind of falls apart. And that's part of the challenge, I think, in the RevOps space, making that connection. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. While we wait for Richard to restart his internet, Dan Grossberg, hey Dan, has a question in the chat, which are, what are some tangible tips in transforming the traditional sales ops and marketing ops, CS ops silo structure to a centralized structure, and where do you start? So my point of view on this is it depends on the leadership team you have in place. So if you have marketing, sales, and CS leaders who are willing to work together and collaborate to solve this problem, working from like an operations and service level agreements point of view, they can partner up and get that done. If your teams, like I experienced early in my career, are butting heads, they don't trust each other, they don't want to work together to identify the common truth, you need to bring in a CRO who's going to lead that change. It's not something as an operations person you can do because there's only so much data you can bring to the table. At the end of the day, the leadership team has to buy into this philosophy or it's not going to gain traction.
So one of my very basic philosophies of life is that leadership matters. Leadership matters in every dimension of life, whether it's business or government or politics or whatever sphere, leaders count for a great deal. So I certainly share your observation, Marko. I would also point out that one of my other basic observations of life is that nobody likes change, and that's really what the question really hints at. You know, we all get up every day and go to work, however, whether it's a 12-foot journey into our home office or we're going somewhere else, and we expect to do the same thing each day that we did the previous day. And that's not the way the world works. You know, we're seeing transformation occur at a very rapid pace. So we can bring all of the best data and analytic tools to bear, but it has to be paired with a business transformation, business process, re-engineering process to put those changes in place. You know, I often say that if we apply new technology to an existing business process, we get the same broken business process, but with new technology. So we need to do both together. And that's oftentimes the most difficult. And that's certainly where the leadership component plays a major role. So focusing on the change and the transformation as much as we focus on the technology is critical to success here.
Thanks. And I am back because of Miami. But I think we can move on to the importance of data analytics in creating a repeatable revenue process. So Martin, I know that you had a good point on going beyond the funnel and the forecasting sales and revenue piece.
Well, so certainly being able to understand where a particular quarter or month or whatever period is one is measuring is going to end up is an important element, and being able to utilize the kind of forecasting capabilities that are available really has quite significant business value. There are tools that we have now that exist that can be really quite accurate in forecasting where a period's performance is likely to end. It's certainly true that we need to aggregate up a couple of levels because one unit may experience an unexpected sale, a great deal of success, where another unit might be disappointed. But when we get to the corporate level, if you will, some of those random events add out or equalize across the units, and and being able to produce that forecast is extremely helpful for senior leaders. But I would make two additional points. One is sales leaders generally believe that they're pretty good at forecasting. They have to be. They have to think that because they need a lot of confidence as they go through the quarter. But generally, we all have a different vested interest in the outcome. Manufacturing wants to manage costs but not get caught short. The same thing for service delivery units, whereas sellers are looking to deliver against a goal. So we need to have an objective standard that the senior leaders can rely on, and that's really where the forecasting tools, certainly at the aggregate level, can deliver a lot of value and be able to provide some quite significant benefit in being able to deliver the results that organizations are relied on.
Right. And Marko, I know that you, sorry, I'm not sure if you guys already talked about working backwards for the metrics.
We haven't, so I can talk about that. So building off Martin's point on the importance of data, one of the key things we need to understand is what action can you take off the metric? Because if you're tracking a metric just for the sake of tracking it, that's just creating busy work and confusion for your team. What I really advocate for is working backwards through your funnel. So what's the revenue goal we want to get to? What's our average selling price in that segment? How many deals do we need? What's the sales cycle? You can break that down into 3 core metrics your team really can manage as an output. Your volume, value, velocity, and conversion rates. So if we break down each of those: volume, how many leads are you dropping in your funnel? How many opportunities do you have at each stage? How many deals do you need closed won? Value is easy. What are they worth? What's the average deal size for them? How do you tweak that? How does it vary by segment? Velocity is how fast things are moving through stages in your funnel. So from lead to first meeting, from first meeting to pipeline, and from pipeline to won, how long are things spending in each stage, and can we speed that up? Using velocity is really powerful to work backwards for your revenue targets, to figure out when do we need leads in our funnel. Because if you're selling to the enterprise, you need next year's Q1 in your funnel today. And the last one is conversion rates. How many things move from stage to stage in your funnel? So starting at the top from MQL, how many of your leads were actually worked by a seller? Meaning they sent an email, they made a phone call. How many of those convert to meetings, convert to each stage of your opportunity? And you can use that conversion rate math to work backwards to your volume targets. You can use that daily or weekly or quarterly to see, is our business stable? Is it predictable? It can really help you understand those operational cadences of your business that you need in order to drive revenue growth. Martin, I think there's a point in there about like capacity and the ability to impact.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to. Marko raises a great point that it's not only internal data that matter, but it's external data as well. Being aware of the sales cycle, the industry sales cycle, the company sales cycle, which differs for different sets of offerings. But also being aware of the size of the market opportunity. As you know, if you follow Marko's arithmetic back through the process, you ultimately get to what's the size of the opportunity that's going to generate the leads that are ultimately going to generate the opportunities. And you know, we have to work not only in the sales and marketing organization, but with our finance colleagues and our leaders, senior leaders, so that we don't get committed to growing a revenue base that's larger than the opportunity that exists. Now that sounds crazy, but for many large organizations in many markets, that can happen. And so being able to provide that guidance as sales or as financial objectives are set and their implications for sales objectives, bringing in that external data to that external customer data, understanding the profile of the customer, the buying cycle, the buying decisions, the size of those buying decisions is extremely important, starting with customer data.
Welcome back, Rich. Wow, it's been a moment.
Thank you. Yeah, you'll see I've transitioned from my normal situation to my Wi-Fi hotspot here. Just lost power. Thank you for hopping in, Gina, and I apologize for that. That's got to be a first on MSP.
That's okay. Martin was just finishing his point about the hidden revenue impacted. And next, we would like to talk about territory and quota.
I love it. I can pick it up. Thank you for hopping in, Gina. I appreciate that. And guest appearance by Gina from the team behind the scenes, which is always great. But I think territory planning and setting up quotas and making sure you do that in an equally economically viable fashion is one of, I think, the biggest challenges that you can face as a revenue leader. How do you even factor that in as you start to fold in more data into the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic when you're thinking about it from two lenses. One is the point Martin brought up, which is, are you setting the company up to reach its growth goals? And the other is, are you setting your sellers up to be successful? Because if you aren't factoring in your compensation plans with your territory plans and seeing, is it achievable that a sales rep is going to make what we've committed them to with the territory they have? They're going to churn. And you don't want to build your territories from the point of view of seller who screams loudest gets the largest territory. So there's a lot of things you can do. I will try to talk about this without doing a product plug for our territory and quota product, but you really want to look at territory balancing. Do we have enough leads? Do we have enough pipeline? Do we have enough strategic accounts in there to meet the revenue goal? Are the territories equally sized based on equal compensation plans? Do we have the right product mix and the right foundations in there to achieve it? And it's the ability to do that assessment and to adjust those assessments as you refactor your territories is really important. The other big point here is territory planning isn't a one-time thing. A lot of people make it a big event that happens once a year, and then some of your salespeople leave, you have a new product launch, your market shifts, and all of a sudden you have new territories in June. How do you make sure your systems are up to date, your communication is rolled out, and that whole play around fairness and equality continues through your territory plans?
And having that be a discipline that you have organizationally, does that also help as you scale your team? Right. So that's always a tension, right? We want to have some good leads set aside for the next class of reps that we're going to hire, but I've got people in seat that are ramped to handle them. How do you balance that tension? Or is it just more making it part of a process versus a one-time thing?
I would make that part of a process, because you have to, this is one of those reasons why RevOps really matters, because it's about the bridge between marketing and sales. If you do territory planning in isolation, in sales without factoring in your marketing plans, you're not going to set up that next gen of reps for success. If marketing doesn't know you have a cohort of 20 BDRs starting, they need time to get those programs in place. They need to get those leads flowing. They need to create a safety net for those reps to be successful. So it is a process. It is constant because your business is always changing. Martin, I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh, I agree completely. But I wanted to go back to a point, yeah, Marko, that you mentioned at the outset, and really just provide a little bit more commentary on it, and that is around the economic value or the business value that's being created with territory and quota planning. And as Marko pointed out, there are really two personas that have an interest in this. One is the salesperson. The other is the business leader. We want to be able to have sellers be successful. We want to be able to structure territories that match the skills of the seller with the needs of the clients. We want to be able to set quotas that are achievable, or at least a large proportion of the sellers can achieve their quota. So we want sellers to be successful. We want their income potential to continue to grow. It's not only for their own purposes, so that they can buy their next boat or build a new swimming pool, however they choose to use their income for their own purposes, but also because as Marko was referencing, it's a very expensive proposition to add new sellers. And oftentimes senior leaders will say, oh, well, let's add 5 new sellers and we'll boost our sales in Q1 by 5x, whatever that is. Well, no, it takes time to hire, recruit, onboard. It takes time to grow the productivity of those sellers. Depending on the industry of the firm, it can take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, depending upon the nature of the product or the offering. So for sellers to be successful and to retain sellers, skilled sellers, is an important part of the value created around territory and quota planning. With respect to senior leaders, for the most part, the investment in sales is a very significant investment that organizations make. It represents a very large proportion of the expense that an organization undertakes. And it means that we don't allocate expense to some other purpose. So this is a capital allocation decision that is taken very seriously by senior leaders. So therefore, the ability of a territory planning exercise to identify those clients where we want to make a significant financial investment to build a relationship is a very important investment, just like if we were buying a new piece of capital equipment, or just like if we were opening a new R&D facility. Investing in a client relationship is a critically important decision in generating sufficient ROI as a result of that investment is important. It could be a large client where it's maybe $1 million investment per year, or it could be a collection of smaller clients where we have a sales team. We often get into situations where sellers will say, look, I know, boss, we've been calling on this client for 5 years and we haven't gotten anywhere, but I'll tell you, boss, this is the year. We're going to make a breakthrough. But finally, as a sales leader, you have to say, stop. We've done this enough. We've made a big enough investment. It's just not going to happen. Not all companies can get along and work together. It's just in the nature of business relationships. So prioritizing those client relationships and making those investments in terms of how the territories are structured and how the quotas are set is a critical piece of this process. And it's really what is of greatest interest to the C-suite in terms of territory management and territory planning and quota planning.
I want to restate what you just said there, Martin, because I think it's pretty impactful, right? So what Martin, and correct me if make sure I'm capturing this the right way. What were you really saying is, hey, when we design a territory, we're saying, hey, we're going to invest like we would building a machine to get revenue out of that territory. And as part of that, we expect to get, you're in the Chicago area, so we expect to get McDonald's and United and maybe 3M, right? That's not too far.
Sure.
And we're gonna spend, salary to get that revenue in. I think that's an amazing way to frame capacity and quota planning from a business level. One question that comes up, and this has come up a few times in registration. How have you seen it? Let's start with you, Martin, but Marko, I'm sure you've got perspective on this as well. How have you seen that alignment exist between the revenue operations role and Marco, I know you talked about marketing before, but the revenue operations role and your business planning functions or your finance functions, maybe at smaller companies? How have you seen that work really, really well?
Well, when we're in the RevOps mindset, if you will, it works very well because there's an understanding of what the business value is, the business objective and goals are, and the opportunities that are being created, and that's when we see our finance colleagues and our sales ops colleagues and our marketing colleagues kind of all working together. But certainly when we have siloed organizations with teams working to different objectives or maybe taking different approaches or having different processes, that's when the investments don't pay off. And when we don't generate the kind of return that's necessary. So it's the integration and a point I made earlier around the change management, doing things in a different way that oftentimes nobody likes to have to change the way they do things, but that's the change management to create the integration that's going to drive the ROI that's ultimately going to make an organization successful.
I think that's a great point. Marco, anything else to add on that? Just driving, make sure we got good alignment there.
Yeah, I think Martin's exactly right. Alignment is the fundamental challenge. I think depending on the scale of your company, FP&A and RevOps might be the same team. At a large organization, they're not going to necessarily talk to each other. So I think RevOps can lead the way here by bringing data and by understanding things that FP&A may not be factoring in, like we talked about, like seller ramp time, how much like lead gen we need for a territory. So I think that's your foundation.
I think that the way I've heard that phrase, I think it was a blog post called "My business is not your spreadsheet," as a way to make sure that you've got kind of good alignment there. This has been great. So our last topic area that we want to talk about, and folks, we've got Martin and Marco here for probably about another 15 minutes. So please do start getting those questions lined up in the Q&A panel. But I wanted to talk a little bit about just how do you start to get that mindset? Get yourself on the front foot and start to really adopt that RevOps mindset. And Marco, let's start with you on this because you literally wrote a book on it. So let's give you a chance to share a little bit of that.
Yeah. So I think this is where I made a mistake in the book because a lot of companies built their RevOps functions off the RevOps framework. And in that, I articulate an org structure where you have a CRO leading your operations team. And I think that led a lot of people to think RevOps is an org change. I need to refactor my org chart. This is a big heavy lift and I can't do it without like turfing my SVP sales. And that feels very scary and hard to do. What I kind of missed in the early days of RevOps is putting the operations back into RevOps. And so I think if you start with your foundation of, do we have agreed upon handoffs? Do we have agreed upon SLAs for those handoffs? Do we agree to the definition of what a metric is, what an action is? And then can we hold each other accountable to it in accountability meetings? That is the foundation you need. Last fall, I wrote another book called the RevOps Maturity Guide, and that goes through how you can assess where you are at these different levels of maturity, but also gives you that firepower to go to your leadership team and say like, hey, you know what, we're at level 1 of executive alignment because no one even agrees that we need SLAs, versus we're at level 4, which is we have an SLA for every stage of our funnel where we do a handoff between teams. And that's kind of that level set you need. It's like, where are we? Where do we want to be? And do we agree on how we get there together?
I think that's the idea of having good data underpinning all of that totally makes sense. So that way marketing and sales and customer success are all like, no, an opportunity is an opportunity, a lead is a lead, and here's what the TAM and account principles look like here. We've got Martin, actually, we've got a little bit of time.
Yeah, let me just add a point to build on Marco's thought, and that is the benefit of engaging in maturity assessment. There are a growing number of maturity assessment tools to assess the capability of an organization and the skills that individuals have who make up that organization. So it's the assessment, the organizational assessment, and the skills of the individuals. And doing the maturity assessment is one way to be able to identify where the gaps are, to be able to drive an opportunity for change where there may be resistance, to be able to understand where there is business value of taking a new and a different approach. So, I would certainly recommend that folks look for the tools around maturity assessment as perhaps a first step in this process.
I think that great points here, folks. We're going to move to Q&A. There's a bunch of great questions at registration. There's some already sitting in our Q&A panel. Marko, let's start with you with this one. And this is a question from Ritu. What are the top 5, or what are some of the top metrics that RevOps should be tracking in a smaller organization, or establish and track in a smaller organization?
Yeah, I'll go back to something I mentioned earlier, which is volume, value, velocity, and conversion rates. You need to have those 4 metrics for everything from web traffic to MQL, MQL to meeting, meeting to pipeline, pipeline to one. If you don't have those metrics, you can't understand the baseline foundations of your business. You need to track those weekly or monthly to see how they're changing. And I would recommend you cohort them by lead created date or opportunity created date, so that you have a consistent method of seeing, is your business improving or is it declining over time? So a practical example of how you can use this, if all of a sudden your MQL to meeting booked conversion rate drops, you can drill into that. Did we recently add SDRs? Did we change our cadences? Are we not completing our cadences? Are we not responding to our leads quickly enough? It's that early warning system that you need to see something is changing here and we can fix it. So I would have that as your baseline, and then on top of that, add your SLAs.
I think that's great. Martin, anything else to add, or any other thoughts on some important metrics? I think Marko, that was a pretty
I think Marko has it. I would just observe that when we're talking about smaller businesses, virtually all businesses with, I'm going to make up a number, more than 10 employees are using some sort of CRM tool these days. So these metrics are readily available to just about everybody.
Yeah, and I think the other part with this too is RevOps is getting done in your organization. Martin, like you were saying, RevOps is getting done in your organization, whether you've got someone doing it, or you've got a team of someone's doing it, or it's happening to you whether you know it or not.
Exactly.
So another question coming in here, and I love this one. It comes up from time to time. Anytime we talk about the future is, how will AI and machine learning affect the future of, in this case, revenue operations, but sales and revenue organizations in general. Martin, let's start with you on that point, just given what you've seen and what you've experienced and as you've sort of moved along in your career.
So first of all, let's talk about what AI and machine learning are. And I often say we all use it, and we've all experienced it, even if you don't know it. When you type a text and your phone predicts what word you're trying to type, that's a little small machine learning algorithm that sits in your phone that gives you that result. When you get on Netflix and Netflix tells you, or Spotify, if you liked this video, you like this music, you'll like this, right? If you get on Amazon and it says, if you've read this book or bought this product, you might, these are recommendation engines that are at the heart of machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? So it's all about prediction, predicting a future action, which can be quite valuable. The prediction might be wrong, but it's a point of view that allows us, in whether it's our personal lives or our business lives, to make a judgment around what our next action is likely to be. So we do predictions in RevOps in a number of different ways. We need to be able to, as we spoke earlier, we need to be able to predict sales. We need to be able to not only predict sales at the individual opportunity level, but aggregate it all the way up to the entire company-wide level. We need to be able to make recommendations to sellers as to what the next best opportunity might be for a given client, given the client's industry and experience and business problems and past purchases, et cetera, or if it's in the consumer world, consumer's situation. Pricing. We want to be able to predict what is the optimal price, the price that will allow us to win the most deals or most transactions, but at the same time achieve our own profitability objectives, to get the balance between meeting the needs of the buyer and being able to deliver the appropriate results for the seller. So there are a number of different predictions, recommendations, future actions that machine learning and artificial intelligence can help us with.
I think that's probably a topic in and of itself as well. Like where will
Topic
that
for another day?
I love it. This is going to be the last question that we take here, and Marko, let's start with you on this. Since RevOps deals with the integration between several areas, marketing, sales, CS, how deep do you think the general technical knowledge needs to be of both the team and of each one of those disciplines?
So I think that depends on the audience you're talking about. So should the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of CS deeply understand each other's discipline? Not as much. They should know like the handoff point, like what am I getting? Do we agree on what we're getting? Should the operations team, whether it's sales ops or RevOps, deeply understand the full funnel and how it works? They need to. I think if you're a RevOps person and you only know sales ops, you don't understand things like web to lead conversion, demand generation, lead routing, and you're not factoring that into your ops model, you're missing half the revenue growth you can find. If you're not looking at the customer success side, you're missing like 80% of your revenue. One thing that's like really scary to me when I talk to companies is that they don't factor in that 80% of our revenue is going to be from retention. Within that customer base, there's a massive expansion opportunity. There's cross-sell opportunities. There's referral opportunities. Are we doing customer marketing? Are we doing research in our accounts to understand, do we have deep penetration within those accounts? Is there a parent account we can cross-sell or expand into? When leads come in from a customer, are we routing them to the CSM so that we can say like, hey, are they maybe like reevaluating vendors so we can get ahead of churn? Like no one in RevOps talks about that. And I think that's like operations people need to deeply understand these points because they're either missing room for lead gen growth or they're missing room for customer expansion.
I think that last point, especially in the early phases of the pandemic, we had a lot of conversations about how to generate pipeline, and the stories that we heard in conversations like this and in the community were just, it's your customers. It's been right in front of us all along. And I think, Marko, that point especially is like sales. I think most people understand how that works, but what you're talking about is really pulling the funnel, which we usually say stops at closed won, all the way through to maybe there's like an advocacy component or second order revenue or something like that. And that I love that framing for how RevOps can really think about pulling that all the way through. It's probably another session for us to talk about second order revenue and CS operation. We just have to have you guys back on. Folks, I gotta say, this has been awesome. I apologize for FP&L down here in Miami for losing power, but we're making the best of it that we can. Before we wrap up, Marko and Martin, I just want to get one key takeaway, and I'm going to frame it as a question for each of you. Martin, what is the future of revenue operations?
Well, I would go back to a point that Marko just made, being able to understand the full extent of the investment that are being made in client relationships, and being able to understand when we get to the point of having success with customers. That's where the greatest income and the greatest profit opportunities are, because we make a huge investment to build relationships with clients, bring on new clients. But what we really want to focus on is the life cycle of the client, and being able to serve that client and benefit from that high profit opportunity with customer success after the long cycle of investments that RevOps helps us facilitate.
Great. I really do feel like that's another session for us to just dive deep into. Marko, I'm going to ask you a different flavor of the question. So thinking about the future of revenue and revenue operations, what's got you most excited from like a technology or solution standpoint, above and beyond the awesome work that's going on in Varicent?
I think RevOps as a buzzword hasn't really delivered on the promise in products. I don't think that's really in market yet today of something that looks at the full funnel. So when we talk about full funnel of everything from marketing to sales to expansion, there isn't really any one product that looks at that full funnel today. I think there's been enough talk around the problem that technology is starting to converge on solving it. And I think when companies can really have that holistic view and see that through technology, it's going to change the way they manage the operational cadence of their business.
I think that is something that's so challenging to do right now. And I think a lot of the programs that you see on RevOps are, it's really tough because you've got these data silos and all that. I think that's probably another conversation for us as well. Marko, Martin, thank you both so much. I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you so much for taking some time this afternoon to share your perspectives. And then for folks that are interested, I know that Marko had mentioned this a few times, the RevOps framework. I dropped a link in the chat panel there. It's also up on your screen. You can go ahead and grab that there. It's a must read if this is a topic that's worth spending an hour on in our conversation here today, and you want to go deeper. I would certainly encourage you to check that out. Marko and Martin, on behalf of all of the folks in the MSP community, Gina, who we got a guest appearance from, and the rest of the team behind the scenes, thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives here today. It was wonderful to have you on, and I look forward to joining you again in a session like this.
Thanks for having me.
Pleased to have been with you.
Excellent. Take care, gentlemen. Be safe.